Ahora le damos la bienvenida a Mr. Zachary.
Autor y conferencista. En 2018, Zachary se unió al Instituto de Educación, Institute of Education, del University College London, como profesor asociado. Actualmente se desempeña en el Departamento de Psicología y Desarrollo Humano como líder del programa de programas de posgrado en Educación Especial y Liderazgo Inclusivo Internacional. Fue miembro del cuerpo docente en el Instituto Nacional de Educación en Singapur desde 2013 hasta 2018. Recibió numerosos premios y reconocimientos. El trabajo actual de Zachary se centra en la neurociencia educativa, la tecnología móvil y el liderazgo. Ha ofrecido conferencias a líderes educativos y profesores de educación superior en América del Norte, América Central, Europa, África y Asia.
Aprendemos mucho al escucharte. Queremos hacerte una entrega de recordatorio ION. ¿Aplauso ION? ¿Así? Ok.
Hola. Hola. It's okay? Yes. My Spanish is not good. So English, yes? Okay. Thank you, thank you. How are you today? You good? All right, great. So I have this session and then the following keynote. And what we're going to talk about in this first session, I would like to just show you a couple of examples of how schools and how universities and how societies around the world are preparing students for the workplace. So next slide, please. So as they mentioned in my introduction, I work at UCL. I lead many changes in education. And change in education is often very slow. But I think we are on the, we're working towards something a lot faster. And I'm quite excited about what it means for inclusion. If we think about adulthood, next slide, I would like you to think about what that means. So if you can turn to a partner, just turn to a partner, someone close to you. If there's someone by themselves, make sure you include them. When you think about adulthood, what does that mean to you? What is adulthood to you? All right, 1 minute, you talk to your neighbor. Talk to your neighbor, please. Okay, so if we think about adulthood, adulthood means many, many things. It can mean education, employment, social life, having friends. It can mean all of these different things. And next slide, please. When we narrow adulthood down, though, it's really about these 5 things. Adulthood is about having choice in what you do. Adulthood is about having the freedom to make your own choices, to do it yourself. Adulthood is about opportunities. So you have many, many choices, many opportunities. Adulthood is about access to many things. And adulthood is about independence. So again, by yourself, you get to choose what you want or what you don't want, right? Next slide, please. But in order to do that, next slide, please. You have to have a set of skills. To be independent, you have to have a set of skills. That includes simple things, like if you want to go to a job, you have to know how to travel there. Who was that? You have to know how to take a bus, or take a taxi, or drive a car. You have to be able to follow a timetable, follow a schedule. So you have to know this happens at 8 p.m., this happens at 9 p.m., this happens at 3. You have to understand that there are going to be situations where you have to talk to people. And you may not know what that conversation looks like, but you have to engage with people. We have to make sure that we get enough sleep, that we take care of our bodies, that we eat on time, that we exercise so that we stay healthy. We might have to understand how to budget money. How do you handle money as an adult? And again, you have to understand how to manage your time. So we often talk about what we want for our children to become adults, but do we actually teach them these skills? We spend a lot of time on academic skills, but when we think about what adulthood actually means, it means these types of skills. Next slide, please. Because again, adulthood is about a community. It's about how you interact with that community. It's about how you contribute to that community. And it can be any number of things that you might do. But you have to have a set of skills in order to do those things. And oftentimes, we haven't done a great job of teaching our kids what those other skills look like. Next slide, please. So, I would like you to think about the young people in your life that you're trying to support. It might be a student, it may be a child of yours, it may be a neighbor. Here's some questions I would like you to ask. Do you know what they want in their future? Do they want a family? Do they want their own home? Do they want a job, a car? Do they want to go on holiday? Do they know what they'll need to make that happen? Do they know how much money they will need? Do they understand what money means? The last question there is, are we teaching them all these other skills, including long-term skills, to help them accomplish whatever those goals are? Next slide, please. So, do they know how to call a doctor and make an appointment for themselves? Do our kids know how to use an app online? Not just a game, an app. Do they know how to pay a bill online? Access a bank account? Do they know how to file taxes? Go to the gym? These are all things that we might take for granted. But when we talk about independence for students with disabilities and trying to create inclusive societies, we have to make sure that we're teaching these things as well. Next slide, please. Independence is not about us serving students. And this is a really hard thing for a lot of us to understand, especially if it's your own child, especially if it's your son or daughter. Independence is about them having the opportunity to do things on their own. And that might mean that they fail. That might mean that they get a little bruised up, that they get bumped up along the way. About 15 years ago, I was interviewing some parents about disability in their child who has disabilities. And the child was 19 years old, and he was getting ready to be an adult. And the mom that I was speaking with started crying. She just broke down in the middle of the conversation. And I said, "Are you okay?" And she said, "It's the first time I've realized I'm not going to be there forever. At some point, he's going to have to do this stuff on his own. And that scares me." And it was at that moment that she hadn't really thought about it before, because she was so used to helping and serving and loving on him that she hadn't realized that at some point she's not going to be around. And what happens then? Next slide, please. And so what I want to show you today is two examples, one from the USA and one from Japan, about university programs that are allowing students to gain independence. Okay, so these are actual universities around the world, some in the US, some in Japan, that are helping students to gain independence. So next slide, please. This is called Think College, and you can look this up. They have a very, very good website. Next slide. And what they do is they look at especially students with intellectual disabilities. So it could be Down syndrome, it could be what we used to refer to as mental retardation. It could be anything that really acutely affects a child intellectually. Next slide. Please. Thank you. This is how many programs across the USA, how many universities offer programs for these students. So there are over 300 universities that have programs specifically for students with disabilities, especially more severe disabilities like intellectual disabilities. Over 300 programs. So we may not have that here yet, but what I want to show you is what you can aspire to, right? What we can hope for. Next slide, please. When we think about the future, maybe, there we go. Some of these university programs, again, there's over 300 of them, they vary. So it could be students who want to try to get a degree, a college degree, or not. Some students may only want to go for 1 year. Some students want to go for all 4 years. Some students can earn a certificate at the end of it, says they had the university experience. Other people might go and earn a whole degree. There's all types of different programs that they use. Next slide, please. They take actual college courses. So there are certain courses within the university that they're enrolled in. There can be modifications made in some of those programs. They can have personal tutors that can help them work through some of the content. Next slide, please. There's employment on campus. So they have internships on college campuses, on university campuses. So they might work in the bookstore, they might work at a restaurant, they might work at a retail shop. They also will help them get jobs off campus. So it's not just on campus that they're also working off campus. Next slide, please. The big thing about this is they also have a lot of extracurricular activities. So they are engaged with the other students. It might be the dance team, or chess club, or drama, any of those things. But these are very, very specific programs at the university level that help students to become really engaged with the normal population. And when I say normal population, what I mean by that is everything else that normally happens on a university campus. So anything that happens on a university campus, these students are engaged with. They can participate in. Next slide, please. In many of the programs, they also live on campus. Now again, I would like you to think about your particular student, your particular child. Would they be ready to leave your home right now and go live on a university campus by themselves? What does that look like for them? Are you preparing them for that? Because that is something that is really, really unique about these programs, is for the first time these students have had a chance to live by themselves around other people their age and build what we call, again, a community. Next slide, please. There's all types, this is boring stuff, don't pay attention to this. This is all legislation that is from the government. But what I put this up here for is that there's many laws that protect these students. Do students know what the laws are that protect them? Are students aware of what they're entitled to? Do students understand that they have to be able to self-advocate for themselves? These are all skills that you and I might just learn. We have to explicitly teach our students that, right? Next slide, please. Next slide. Next slide. So the other thing that these programs often have is they do have actual internships. And they can be placed on campus, they can be placed off campus. But there is a set of criteria that students have to engage with, that they have to be able to show that they're capable of. And you know what the hardest part is? Can anyone guess what the most challenging part is of this? Anyone? Students have never learned about any of this. because parents and teachers have always done everything for them. So they have all these opportunities that they don't even know about. They don't know how to self-advocate. They don't even know what questions to ask. In many cases, that's the biggest barrier, is us preparing them for these opportunities. So again, I understand that in certain contexts, I've worked around the world, these opportunities don't exist yet. But what we also see is that when they do exist, kids aren't ready for them. Students aren't ready for them because we haven't prepared them. Next slide, please. Next slide. So I'm going to show you this video. It's just 2 or 3 minutes long. And this is some of the students that are living on university campuses and participating in these programs. Okay? So we can play the video, please. I'm so sorry. Apparently there is a problem with the technology. But what will happen is we'll share the video with you. I think the most important thing to think about, though, and I would like you to, again, talk to someone, and I see some of you are sitting by yourselves. If you look around you, if you see someone sitting by themselves, talk to them. Okay, pull them in. So we've got some people in the middle that are trying to be by themselves. Make sure they're included in the conversation. I'd like you to take 2 minutes, and I want you to think about the students that you work with, your child, someone you teach. Would they be ready for university? Don't worry about academics. Don't think about academics. Would they be ready for a university experience? And if not, why not? Okay, so take 3 minutes and discuss. Okay, go.
Hola a todos. Yo vi que mis compañeros se portan mal. Yo hablo del cole. Y mis compañeros dicen grosería y eso. Y se portan muy mal. Y también dice cosas malas como como empujar a las otras o eso.
Gracias. So,
Aplauso guión para evitar.
so you need the microphone, though. So again, what she just explained is social behavior.
Yes.
Right? And that you wouldn't be able to do that in a community setting, yeah? So what are some of the other examples? What are students not ready for before they go to university? Be brave. Who wants to be brave? Yes, right here.
Ah, sí.
Blindness. Yeah. Yeah. Families are afraid to let their kids go. So they protect them so much because they're scared of their independence.
Las familias sobreprotegen a los niños porque tienen miedo que los lastimen, entonces esa puede ser una razón.
Right here, yes. So what are those specific experiences they need to be independent, whether they're going to university or getting a job somewhere else?
They might get a job, but for example, everything that is related to household or laundry, they won't even cook. So basic skills
So again, basic skills, laundry, cooking. Can you repeat that for us?
Because when they speak, the interpreter needs to listen to what they're saying.
That's why
so
if you
that
just
they can-
repeat it, because I know the interpreter can't hear the audience, I just want to repeat it. Thank you. Okay, so yes, things like laundry, cooking, right? All those little things. But again, my challenge to you is that if we want students to be independent, if we want an inclusive society, what do we have to start teaching our kids? Those types of skills, right? Is there anything else that comes up? Anything else? Anyone? What's that? Management of money. How do we manage money? How do they manage money? Do we work on those things? Again, this is the point of whether it's going to university, because it may be very different. In many countries it's very different. I'll give you another example in just a second from Japan. But the point is the social skills and the independent skills are things that we don't teach enough. We talk about wanting them to be included in society, but we don't spend any time with the social skills, the personal skills, the independent skills, the money management, the laundering, all those things that will help include them in societies. So we have to be more intentional about that. Yes? Romantic relationships, you know? Exactly, that there's lots of research going on right now about sex education for kids with disabilities, for individuals with disabilities, and what that looks like, and how that should happen. Yes?
Technology, and the other thing is deal with stress.
Technology is what?
Technology is another limitation.
Technology is another limitation. I'm going to talk about technology in the keynote coming up next. But yes, do kids know how to use technology? Do our students know how to use it appropriately, other than just a game? You know, many of them can play games, but can they use Google Maps? It's a different set of skills, perhaps. Yes?
I also believe that it is a very cultural thing, because here in Paraguay or all Latin America, people, when you finish high school and you have to go to college, you still live with your parents. Usually you don't leave your parents' house until you get married. So there are like 35-year-old people still living at home. And the culture here is very, like the parents are very overprotective, or they do not allow kids to be so independent or autonomous. So I know in other countries that is like forced upon, like when you finish high school, you have to go to college and you live there in a dorm. We don't have that here, like we don't have that opportunity. So I believe it's also a very cultural thing that we have here in Latin America.
I understand that, and I want you to understand that I'm not taking away from the cultural context at all.
No, I know.
Because when I was in Singapore, you don't move away. I was in Singapore for 6 years, and you stay with your family, same type of thing, until you get married. And even sometimes then, you still live with your family.
Right.
It's those other independent skills, travel. Whether you're living with your family or not, do you know how to get around a city? Do you know how to get to a school and back? Those are the kind of things that we're talking about. So I understand your thought very much. It makes a lot of sense. But again, sometimes it's quite easy to just say, oh, well, that's just not the way we do it here. But there are lots of other skills that we still need, that we have to be teaching. So if we go to the next slide, please. Next slide. I'm going to show you, hopefully this video will work. This is some work I did when I was doing my PhD. This is probably 2012, I guess. This is a young woman named Anna. There will be no sound, no volume on this. But we were working with her on how to go to a job interview. If she ever wanted a job, what would that look like? Because she would have to go in and speak to someone about the job. So we're working with her on the job interview. Now, this is the very first time we had worked with her. You'll see, that's me. I'm introducing her. I'm going to sit down. She's going to meet the woman who's going to be interviewing her, right? This is all just training. So let's see if this video plays. Oh, go back, please. In the bottom left-hand corner, you should be able to play the video. Okay, video's not going to work. I know, it's okay. That's okay. That's okay. That's all right. We're okay. What you would see, I'll be Anna. So she came in, she sat down, and she did this. For 5 minutes. Every question was this. And she scratched her head for 5 minutes. She had never been taught how to have eye contact. She had never been taught to sit up. So go to the next slide, please. Next slide. So after just 3 times practicing with her, she was not perfect, but she came in, she sat like this. She did this. If she turned her eyes away, she would always go right back. It was those little tiny things. And all it took was 3 sessions with her for about 10 minutes for her just to understand those little tiny social skills. Because if you look at data on employment for kids with disabilities and for individuals with disabilities, oftentimes the barrier is not once they get the job. Once they get the job, they keep it. It's the interview. It's getting the job. And if they have a problem at the job, it's usually a social problem. It's rarely related to being able to do the actual job. And that's because oftentimes we haven't taught those skills. So again, I'm going to try to stand up. Next slide, please. I would like you to think 3 minutes. How well does your school or curriculum teach functional social skills? How well do you build opportunities for independence, choice, and decision-making into your curriculum or into your daily lessons at home? And how often are the choices that students made actively listened to? If they say, I do want to do that or I don't want to do that, how often do we as the adults actually listen to them? All right, so 3 minutes with your partners, please. With your partners, go. So again, the point of the conversations is just really to think about how much choice are we actually giving our students? How much independence are we allowing them to practice? Because if we want to build inclusive societies, we have to start building inclusive kids. Right? And that's at school, but that's also at home. Next slide, please. So this is, now we're moving to Japan. Very different cultural context. This gentleman, Masato Hasegawa, a gentleman who, social worker, and then he had a child. Next slide, please. This was his daughter, named Asuna. She was born with intellectual disability. She's now 35 years old. But when she was born, he looked out and realized there was going to be nothing for her. Absolutely nothing for her. So Mr. Masagui, he went ahead and what he did is he started, next slide please, he had this vision of a place where people would give up on kids with disabilities or individuals with disabilities to a world where they could actually choose what they wanted to do, where they actually had some initiation. They had some power about who they wanted to be. And he started a college after high school. Next slide, please. And so he said, if you look at the top question, what learning is necessary for independence? That's all he wanted to think about. If I want my daughter to be independent, what does she have to learn to be independent? And he started a college just focusing on that. It was just about independence, right? And so he said, you have to have the power to understand yourself, to face yourself, which means you have to emotionally regulate. You have to be able to control how you feel in certain situations. He said, you have to have the power to improve yourself. So you have to have things around you that will help you get better, that you can improve in life at. And then you have to have the power to connect with others. So building that community that we have as adults, you have to have power that I know how to build community, that I know how to talk to people, right? So again, he calls these non-cognitive abilities. These are not abilities that you would learn in a traditional school. Next slide, please. So in a general university, if you were to go liberal arts curriculum over here, you have all the basics. You have philosophy, psychology, those types of things. In Utaka College, which is what he developed, Utaka College, your first 2 years are only focused on independence training. You don't take any other classes other than independence training. You're learning how to be independent, and I will show you what those courses look like. The second 2 years at the bottom are all about finding employment and jobs. So his entire college is dedicated to independence and jobs, right? Next slide, please. As part of that, your first and second year, and this goes back to some of the things that you pointed out about life, right? These are the classes you take on the left-hand side. On the left-hand side of the classes, so you take things like life, which means laundry, cooking, sewing. You take things like economy. How do I control money? What does it look like to go to the grocery store and buy groceries? How much money do I have to spend? You take things like general education, but that focuses on social norms. Is it okay to touch someone? Is it not okay to touch someone? What am I allowed to do? What should I not do? It focuses on things like labor. SST is social skills training. So how do I shake someone's hand when I meet them? The first 2 years are just focused on those things. That's all they focus on. Next slide, please. The third year is more job focused. So how do you clean up a store? Right? If it's administrative work, how do you use Word? How do you use Excel? How do you use some of those programs? If it's operations, customer service, how do I greet someone who comes into a hotel? What's appropriate? What's inappropriate? So again, your third year is totally about job skills. Next slide, please. Within that, you also have, again, all these external activities. So they have events that you get to help plan. You help plan the annual events. They do leisure activities. So once or twice a month, they have events that have budgets, and the students get to go out by themselves and do things together, right? They have all these things that are built outside of the classwork into the experience. Next slide, please. So they started with one campus, and now they have 14 campuses across Japan, all part of Utaka College. As you can see at the bottom, there's approximately 450 students that are enrolled across Japan. And what kind of outcomes have we seen? Next slide, please. So they have graduated now 150 people. 149 people have graduated. Of those, 110 of them have found full-time employment. So 74% of their graduates now work full-time. They've got about 25% that are doing some kind of welfare work, which means they might work part-time, it might be charity-based, it might be government-based, it's part of a more specific program. And then they have 3 of their graduates who are doing other things, right? the most important thing, again, is look at that where it says workplace retention rate. 95% of their graduates are still employed 1 year later. So it's not like they're going through a program, getting a degree or getting a certificate, getting a job, and then they leave. These are now independent individuals who stay in jobs. And if they stay in jobs, what happens? They pay taxes. They give back to community. They have life skills. They can build careers. Right? Next slide, please. So here's the 4 social issues that Mr. Mastako thinks that he's addressing. Number 1, employment rates have gone way up for individuals with disabilities in Japan because of part of what they've been able to do here, right? Number 2, again, they're staying in jobs. They're not just getting jobs, they're actually being able to stay in jobs. The reduction of national and local government with welfare benefits. So if the Minister of Education was still here today, I would be talking about this is actually really good for society as a whole. Because you're reducing unemployment, you're reducing government welfare that has to go back in, you're actually training, if you invest up front, these people can become really good members of society, these individuals. And number 4, again, recognizing that for people with intellectual disabilities, higher education, university, that's a realistic goal. There's actually education out there beyond secondary school. And that's really important for their motivation. Next slide, please. So I'm going to give a couple of points here, and then if we want to have questions or answers, we can do a little discussion, okay? Next slide, please. I'd like you to just think about this question. This is really important to word this correctly, okay? Do you spend more time talking about students or to students about their future? Do you spend more time talking about students' futures or to students about their future? This is a really important question because we know if we want them to be successful, they have to take ownership. But we have to give them ownership as well. And that starts with understanding what they want and allowing them to go out and sometimes do the work and fail. Next slide, please. So, adulthood, if we go back to what we started with, and jobs, are much more about social skills than technical skills. Sometimes we get so focused on the technical skills, we forget all the other social skills that we need to be working on. Number 2, those social skills have to be able to transfer to multiple environments. So it's not just social skills with this teacher and these 2 kids in this particular classroom. It's a social skill here, and then a social skill outside, and then a social skill downstairs, and then across the street at the shop. So we have to give our students the opportunity to practice those social skills in multiple environments, because that's what adulthood is. Number 3, those practical life skills is what will lead us to inclusion. It's not a government policy. It's not a fancy program. It's helping their students learn those practical life skills that will transfer. And number 4, we have to be brave. We have to be brave. Because we have to let them go. And that's really hard. But we have to be able to do that because we're not going to be here forever. And so we have to be able to provide them an environment where they can learn and grow and fail and pick themselves up and learn again. And that's really, really important. Next slide, please. What I would like to do now is if there's any questions or comments or disagreements, you can disagree, that's okay. Is there anything that you would like to ask or talk about before we take another break before the keynote? Can you help with this part, please? Do you have a mic over there? If you have a mic, Fabio? Yes.
¿Qué tal? Bueno, yo sí voy a hablar en español. Con respecto a lo que estabas mencionando, en mi rol, yo soy una persona con discapacidad física. ¿Sí? Yo no uso medio convencional como usan otras personas en mi condición que usan una silla de ruedas, yo uso un skate.
Un poquito lento para mí, porque es
Ok,
mi primera vez.
Perdón.
He's got a physical disability.
Y uso un skate para poder movilizarme, o sea, no uso
And
una silla.
I use a skate to move myself, not a chair or for mobility.
Soy más cool, perdón.
I'm cool, that's why.
Con respecto a lo que estabas mencionando, y me pareció muy interesante sobre la Universidad de Habilidades para la Vida, porque desde mi rol yo trabajo con personas con discapacidad. Yo estoy encargado ahora de un área que busca empleo para personas con discapacidad, y todo lo que estabas mencionando, sí.
He works. Recuérdame, ¿dónde trabajas?
En Saraquí.
Y preparan a personas
con discapacidad para el empleo.
So he trains people with disabilities so that they can get a job, and he's saying that all you've said is really important. Que todo lo que dijo es muy importante, pero supongo que...
Pero lastimosamente mucho de lo que mencionaste no se lleva a la práctica en una escuela, en un colegio y mucho menos en una universidad.
Unfortunately, everything that you said is really important, but unfortunately that doesn't happen here. And all the skills that are needed to prepare someone to get a job in the future are not really worked. That's our reality, not really worked at schools, in schools, sorry. So he's saying that. Que no se trabaja en las escuelas, que no es la realidad.
Porque lastimosamente en nuestro país muchos de las personas con discapacidad no llegan a acceder a un nivel avanzado académico.
Because our sad reality is that most people with disabilities don't actually get to higher education.
Porque no está luego todavía insertado en nuestro chip o en nuestra cabeza la
Because
inclusión.
Inclusion is not inserted in our chip yet.
Porque no hay práctica con respecto a eso. Y con esto cierro.
Tranqui.
Yo en estos últimos días, y por eso me sorprendió y me gustó mucho el tema, porque en un mes trabajé con 30 chicos formándoles justamente en estas habilidades que los dividí en partes. Y ahí quiero que me ayuden para ver qué puedo aplicar más.
So he's been training kids with all of this for the last couple of days. And
¿Dónde?
¿Le separaste?
No. A esos 30 le formé en 3 habilidades.
So he has this group of 30 people and he trained them in 3 different skills. ¿Cuáles son los?
Currículum, elaborar un currículum vitae.
How to make their CVs, their curriculum.
Marketing personal.
Personal marketing.
Y entrevista laboral, donde practicamos las entrevistas.
And job interviews.
Yep.
¿Qué más, desde tu experiencia, teniendo en cuenta estas universidades que mencionó que me encantó, voy a investigar, podría aplicar más para fomentar más su vida independiente?
So what other areas can he offer these kids, or in what other areas can he work to get them ready for a job?
So, 2 things. I'll answer the second part first. So, number 1, I think the transfer of the social skills. So, like many of us know, every interaction is a job interview. So job interviews are when you sit in front of a formal desk and you shake a hand and you say hello, but you also might meet someone on the street. And the way you present yourself matters. And so every opportunity that we have could potentially be a job interview. So my thing that I think is I would teach these students not just about the job interview, about every social interaction, and always putting themselves in a good opportunity.
¿Vos estás escuchando eso en español? Sí.
The second thing, though, and I think this is important, I'm not here to be sad. I'm not here to look at the reality of the situation. I'm here to help you see what's possible. Does that make sense? Can I get a little I've been doing this for 25 years across the world. I've seen lots of places that are in the same exact situation as is described here. I've seen some places that are still in that same situation because all they do is talk about how bad it is. I've seen other countries that move forward because they stop talking and they start doing the work. And that's part of the reason that this group is so important. When I was here in November, I talked about you've got the right people in the room. You've got the right people here. You've got to go out and bang the drum louder. You've got to focus on the skills that we talked about. You don't just accept that, well, this is just the way it is here. You don't accept that. You decide we're going to be better than that. But that has to start with you, because it's not going to start with those people out there. It has to start in this room. Does that make sense to everyone? Can I get a... All right? It's very important that you understand that. You have to start doing this work. There has to be someone in who says, I'm going to start the university that teaches like that. I'm going to start the college. I'm going to start the parent program at the university. Whoa! Surprise. I'm going to, thank you. I'm going to be the one who starts that. There has to be someone in here who does that because it takes one person. It was one Japanese parent who started a college that now has 450 students and that has employed 150 kids that have now become adults, that now have full-time jobs, that now give back to society. It was one adult. He looked at the reality and he said, this is not good enough. So that's your challenge. But I'm not here to sit here and go, well, that's just how it is. Because that doesn't change anything. Does that make sense? Yeah? You have a question?
What do you recommend for us to work with parents? Like, how can we make parents to understand that children can do more? That they can help cleaning the classroom, they can go and work in a community in the neighborhood, take the broom, do those kind of things. Like, how can we do that?
Did everybody get that? You understand the question? I think you start very small. You start with one thing. They're not going to clean the classroom. They're going to sweep up this little area or wipe off that board. And I think you have to start very, very small. And then, but the thing that we always talk about is little things, big impact. So it's getting parents to understand, okay, when they're at school, they can sweep the floor. Can they do that at home? They could help you. They could help you sweep your floor at home. When they're at school, they help clean the dishes after we have snack. Could they clean the dishes at home? When they're at school, you see, so you start very, very small, and then you help parents to understand that if they can do it here, they should be able to do it there. But it's amazing. How many of you have your own children? How many of you have your own children? Do you see a difference when they're at home and then you hear about them at school and they're doing all this amazing stuff and they won't do it at home? Happens all the time. It's because we don't expect them to do it at home. So we have to make sure that we expect at home the same thing that is happening at school, but we won't know that if, like we said, like you were just saying, if teachers don't tell us. Well, they're capable of this at school, so they must be capable of it at home. Yeah? Really, really important that we start small, though. Good question. Any other questions or comments or jokes? Okay, again, my next talk is going to be more aspirational. I actually have a lot of hope, but also a lot of optimism about what is coming in the next 20 to 30 years. If you're not interested in that, go home. But if you want to think about what is possible, stay. Because there's lots of really exciting things that could happen if we will take charge of it. Okay? All good? Yeah?
Yes.
All right. I think we have a break now. How long do we break for?